Good evening, gang. Okay, well, update on my self-actualized existential crisis moment, which apparently is really normal. So, let's see. Sorry, I have to readjust here. Let's get cozy. Oh, currently 3 a.m. Woke up at 1 a.m. Okay. So yesterday I had a bit of an existential freakout of what is the point. And so I went for a walk, and in my walk, what I heard was the lack of orientation in my life, or for humans when we're born. We're kind of instantly thrown into this kind of, the compass starts moving of like, we become the seeker. There's this lack of orientation, so we start seeking, which is a good thing. It's not a bad thing to be a seeker. And so, in kind of in realizing yesterday, and again, it's not like you hear of these things. You hear of these things in different traditions, different spiritualities, faiths, religions, the returning to self, that we're always looking, but really everything is right here. And you go, yeah, like you think you know, but really you know of. To know of something is really that process of wrestling, turning the object over, looking at it from all angles and having the mind-heart connection where it becomes that an action, application, and understanding. So in the seeker, I will liken the seeker is, you're born into this world and something or someone has informed you that you need to look outside of yourself, that there's something that you need to be looking for. And what I've realized is that the ego, we're really motivated by pleasure, truly. And we'll get into it in a couple other things, messages that I wanted to talk about. So we go into the world and we're seeking, and we're kind of taking in things, being like, are you it? Are you it? Are you it? I don't really know what I'm looking for, but I guess I'll just know when I get there. And I think this thing's gonna be it. Is it this new job? Is this career? Is it this school program? Is it this perfect relationship? If I have a certain amount of kids? Oh, if I get to that. So we love a destination. Human beings love to be in control. We love to know. We love a destination point. And we aim. We pick something, we go, okay, I'm gonna shoot for this thing, and then when I get there, that's gonna be the thing. So we're always seeking. And one of my other videos called The Seen and Unseen, it's just so interesting because I've been following this thread. So yesterday they were like, really, self-actualization in its kind of basic 3 a.m. kind of Cole's Notes version is that the seeker is driving in this car being like, we need to find the driver. Picture it like a dream. You know when dreams are really weird, and especially when you're driving? Picture this. You're in a car driving, and you don't know what the fuck's going on, but you're like, oh man, I need to find the driver of this car, like right now. See how already crazy that sounds? But dreams are like this, right? You're driving, you're driving, and you're going to every place possible, being like, I have to find the driver of this car. Who's going to be driving this car? Like, I have to find the driver. And then that moment where you're like, I'm the driver. So the seeker then becomes aware that they're the seer. And so, yeah, when you've the kind of thing propelling you in life, motivating you, is this lack of orientation where you're going around with a compass being like, oh, if I just finally get to this thing, if I get to this destination, if I just finally understand. But the ego doesn't really know what to do when you finally reach a destination. It's kind of like, oh. So anyway, after I heard the orientation thing, I did come back, and then I was like, okay, I need, because I had said in yesterday's video, it was really weird, the last like 48 hours or something, it started to pop up on my feed just naturally of people being like, oh, what happens after enlightenment and ascension? There's this period of time where you get really depressed and you don't see the point. So I found a fellow that kind of spoke beautifully to it, but it's really about kind of getting the Coles notes. It's like, because we're human and we come with an ego, that in this moment of aha, the ego it has to recalibrate. It's kind of like, whoa. So, and I've spoken to this in yesterday's video too. It's like, I've had those moments of bliss, of the remembering as well. And again, going back to what I was saying about the ego loves pleasure, we really get it locked in that all of these things are going to be pleasure-based. And it's not so. It's not so. You have to have all of the flavors. And so some of the flavors are absolutely bliss. Remembering the oneness, remembering like whether you call it the supreme Godhead, the supreme being, God, spirit, universe, whatever that looks like, the love. Any hoodle. So yeah, that was kind of the update. So where I wanted to continue, well, let's start with my original download that I kind of alluded to very briefly in the beginning of yesterday's video. Okay, so in the math community, and mathematicians have existed forever, Riemann's theorem, which is the prime number theorem, has eluded mathematicians from the beginning of time, and it still has yet to be solved by the math community, which is wild to me because now with our new supercomputer that did that equation that would normally take us 10 trillion years, I think they said it would, and then it solved it in 5 minutes. When I was younger, and it's weird because, P.S., I'm not a mathematician, I'm really good with some math, and some math, it's never my strong point. For some reason, when I was younger, I got really into theorems, and I was really intrigued by the prime number theorem because I love odd numbers, and I think that's what, well, there's a few things that got me onto this math train. Now, in the math community, theorems come with like a prize, like especially the ones that have like, they've been around for hundreds of years that no one solves. So the prime number theorem has this like little bag of like $1 million. If you can solve it, prove it, you go down in history, but also you get $1 million. I wasn't motivated by the money, but I was like, spent a lot of time. I was like, I'm gonna figure this out because one of my skills is like pattern recognition. It's where I go into the math world where I can understand things, yeah, in terms of patterns. And I love solving a mystery. I love a puzzle. My monkey mind, my Gemini monkey mind loves it. So years ago, what I heard as I was trying to sense how to approach it, because I was like, we're clearly thinking about it wrong. Because what's so interesting about prime numbers is that you think there's a pattern and then the pattern shifts. So years ago, the download and the message that I heard was that, yeah, we're thinking about it in terms of very linear pattern recognition. But what they showed me was is that the prime number theorem has more of a song structure. I was like, oh, that's really interesting. And they're like, that's why no one's really figured it out yet, because they're looking at it in this like, okay, this number, if we do this, it's like, okay, we see that there's a pattern here. So, okay, let's follow that to see if the pattern continues. It's this really like kind of predictable, linear, again, science, very in the box, not as creative. And so Spirit was really like, you need to think about it in terms of it having a song structure, and like, how do basic songs go? Because here's the other thing, like, there's all different types of songs, but if we were just to use kind of the traditional Western methodology of like a traditional kind of like pop regular song, it's like verse, chorus, verse, or verse, chorus, verse, bridge, pre-chorus, verse. Like, it's kind of, but there's different movements. And so Spirit wanted me to come back to this, where the message for the collective was of, there's something in your life that you're looking for really obvious patterns, and maybe not as obvious because it requires a bit of digging, but it's in this very is it right brain or left brain? The really kind of more mathy, like whatever the non-creative side of the brain is, where it's like, yeah, linear, in a box, predictable, quantifiable, you know. And so that's where initially we were headed. So when I was getting all my downloads, what started 2 nights ago, and again, I'm following the thread of all of my videos. There's been these like downloads the last 3 weeks where it all seems to be leading to a place, and I've been following, and I'm getting these little chunks. So it started with then, so we have the prime number theorem. So we're going to set that to the side for a second because we'll swing back around to that. Do we want to swing back, or do we want to complete? Hold on, let me look at my book here. Okay, now we'll finish the thought. So one of the songs that I've referenced before in terms of my love readings, but Feist has a song called Pleasure. And the lyrics go, get what I want. Get what I want, and still, it's a mysterious thing. So if we go back to the idea that there's this theorem, there's this problem that's mysterious, that no one can really solve. And again, Spirit was like, wanted me to focus on, yeah, the mysterious thing. And that, hold on. That life is a mysterious thing. That life is a song. And also there's all different types of songs. Going back to song structure, if you look at classical music, oh my God, that does not follow, you know, a very predictable song structure like the pop song of like verse, chorus, verse. Because if you figure that out, then you're like, oh, okay, well, verse comes, chorus, you know, you can kind of then make it predictable. But they were showing me that there's all different types of songs in the world with very different song structures, some of which are not predictable. And they wanted to point out, because Feist says like, make sense of a mysterious thing in part of the lyric. So Spirit was like, had me write down making sense of versus solving. So going back to ego, this idea of we're the seeker, but we always want to know, we want to be in control, and we're always trying to solve the riddle. You know, solve it, not make sense of it. but solve it. The total aha. That if we get to this thing, we get the ultimate prize, the big aha. Congratulations. Whereas instead, the more co-creative thing is not to solve it, but to make sense of it. Do you see what I mean? It's different. And it feels very like kind of, if we were to use like a more masculine, feminine, the masculine, which is the external, going out and claiming and taking and, you know, action oriented, but solving. And I like the idea of the more feminine, of like sitting with, making sense. Because when you also make sense of something, again, there's lots of detail in there. There's lots of different ways of looking at it, holding it up. Also holding it up to different types of light. Light changes things, you know? So leave a little mystery and allow the song to unfold. And that's what I concluded yesterday, is that I really hope that actually no one solves the prime number theorem. In this time of instant gratification, we've really removed the mystery and removing humanness from the world, right? Everything's automated, more machines taking over, everything doing everything for us. We're removing not only our heart and our humanity, but this humanness, the mystery. And isn't really the mystery what's kind of the most delicious thing? Is the not knowing. And so, okay, so we'll put that there. So then I asked myself in my download, because the question was to the collective, but then I like to apply sometimes these messages to myself. So I asked, why do I feel compelled to be seen, recognized, when I am the seer and I am the unseen? And so I answered, oh, well, there's another part of the question. So there's that. And then it says, why do I need the external gaze and validation of another? And so the answer that I heard and wrote down, and that seems true for me, is that it's a means and a way to prove I am here, I exist, as if by being recognized, it would somehow solidify and materialize me into a fully formed, knowable object, right? Because isn't that part of this? We go out into the world seeking, but it's like, as I'd said in the seen and unseen thing, it's like everything wants to be seen. But I was asking, like, why? Why do I need to be seen? Because for me personally, in my life, and the experiences that I've had, I feel as though I haven't been seen. I feel like most of my life has kind of been like living like a ghost. And so a lot of what's motivated me is this proving of self. If I can get you to finally recognize me, I can prove I am here. I do exist. I am worthy. You know? So these were some of the questions that, after 48 hours of sitting in kind of like meditation, brought me to some big aha moments that left me breathless and like felt good in the moment. And then there was a bit of a crash of being like, oh, the ego being like, oh, it's really the ego crashing. That was the no point, because the ego doesn't feel as though it has a point. Okay. So going back to these these questions. And it's funny because Spirit had pointed out there's a series of paintings that I had been working on at some point, but there was this kind of group of paintings that centered around the title of "Where Did You Go? Nowhere. I was always here." And in the painting, it's two people facing each other, but it's, you know, it's one person looking back on itself. And it is this idea of like, where did you go? You know, isn't that our call and response that we're always putting out to the universe? It's like, God, me, like, where are you? Where did you go? And sadly, the answer is, sadly, but yet celebratory, is that nowhere. I'm right here. Okay, hold on. So going back to the mystery. The mystery is the vehicle that, and an experience, just like a song. So when you get to this place of realizing that you're no longer the seeker, you're the seer. And going back to wanting to be seen, when I asked myself, like, if I see me, and I know the truth of me, how do I articulate it? Because going back to how I have felt, like feeling like a ghost my whole life. But they were really trying to point out, it's like the mysterious thing. Like, why do I need to be seen? Isn't it actually kind of beautiful to just, because by being, I am seen. The validation that I seek, it's unnecessary, because also at some point, something will come along the path and see you. And that's a bonus. But if I can be in the unseen, the mysterious, it's really like total liberation. It's a very different vantage point when you realize, again, that you're the driver, you're the kind of totality. Again, it's one of those things. It's cerebral. It's been written about. This isn't new stuff. But what is new is the re-remembering. When you have that experience for yourself, the big aha, or a series of ahas, and your eyes are kind of like, oh shit, cinnamon. Okay, so then we moved into I mentioned it in my video yesterday, but this feeling of feeling bereft by the universe at times, like stranded. Now, I've always believed in something. I'm not saying that I'm right, but what I love is that whenever I've felt spiritually bereft, it's always forced me to go back and reevaluate my belief systems. And I think that's really important when it comes to faith and trust. Not having blind faith and trust. Why I love Buddhism in particular is that it sees itself more as a philosophy, but the idea is like, take these concepts, apply it, bring action to it in your life, and if it holds up and if it works for you, great, and if not, you know, again, if you see the Buddha, kill the Buddha. So as much as I have hated having to go back and reevaluate my own beliefs, around the universe. What is God? Is there a God? What if? And so I played the what if game. So when I was living in New York, there's after that year and a half of like the most magical time in my life, it what started was what I call the 16-year cycle that I feel like is kind of concluding. We'll see, but it would present it so, or like the themes that I was learning at that time. And I'm always really connected, but in these moments of feeling bereft, it's like all of a sudden I'm disconnected. I'm just free falling. I have nothing to anchor into, and all my old tricks, like nothing's talking to me, even though I can channel it for other people, but like this thing isn't talking to me. And then I get my ego about it, and I feel like, oh my God. But it's good because it forces me to reevaluate. And when I play the what if game, I always start with, okay, what if I was wrong? Because I always say, like, I may be wrong in my beliefs. I don't know. None of us will really know until whatever. So I really like to step out of my ego, because there's so many people all over the world that believe that they're right. Everyone believes that they're right. So I really like allowing myself to step into the space of like, what if we're wrong? What would that mean for ourselves? If there was no God, if there was no afterlife, if there were no reincarnations, if the atheists were right, it's just like you become a pile of dirt or something to the effect of that. What would that mean for me philosophically in terms of, again, what is the point of this life? What would I want to do with it? Because if there's no mom, no rules, going back to kind of more of a moral philosophy, if there is nothing and there's no point, what's the glue keeping you together from just not being a sociopath and just, again, kind of raping, murdering, and pillaging? So, and at that time I was a bike messenger, and so all of my jobs, I have a lot of alone time. A lot of alone time in my life, so I have a lot of time to reflect, which is great because I kind of, again, untangle and make sense of things. So what I decided for myself is that even if there was nothing, that the principles I have set for myself, this moral compass, these principles, these beliefs that I have around right conduct, right living, who I would want to be, that if you were to take away, again, the consolation prizes, right? That there's this idea that if we do the right thing, that we get rewarded. There was no reward. Would I still inherently believe in the things that I believe in? Which, when deduced, it just comes down to loving kindness. Would I want to be kind? And the answer is yes, even if there's nothing. Because in my own experience, and I've talked about this with Grace, but like, I just feel like I have truly witnessed things that supersede the human ego. When you've seen Grace, it's truly moving. It sets a tone. It sets a higher par of what is possible. And it's coming from humans, so for me, that's remarkable. If we're to play with the idea of like, if there's nothing, if we're just these like random bags of flesh with consciousness, again, it doesn't make sense to me, but in terms of being an atheist, but so that was what I concluded. So this kind of ties into my own struggles of like, again, living what feels to me like my entire life based off of principles of like truth, honor, justice, integrity, having a spine, you know, and really getting caught in the loop of like truth and justice. So Spirit was like, wanted me to focus on how did I arrive at the idea that these things should benefit me? Because in my life, especially around truth, there's been some really painful things that I've experienced and endured. And the one thing that's been consistent about me is that I've always spoken the truth, told the truth, acted with truth over the comfort of myself and of seemingly no benefit. But where there's static within me is because clearly I have a belief that has been formed that says if I do these things, I should receive some benefit. And so Spirit was like, why do you need to benefit from it? Going back to the idea of like, even if there was nothing, would you still want to act in accordance with these beliefs? And the answer is yes. Because so far in my life, what has made it at times really unbearable, and again, of proving of self, is having people, institutions tell me who I am, what the truth is, even when it's clearly distorted, you know? Just to give you reference, you know, and I spoke about this in my other video, I've only known violence. I grew up in very chaotic homes with very unwell people. But like the true black sheep of the family, I've always been a protector, and I've always believed in telling the truth. I don't know why. It just has always been. And I was a child of the court because of the things going on in the home, and speaking the truth, all the people, places, and things that were supposed to protect myself, my mom, my sister. I did all these things, and again, going back to self of like, what does it matter if you know yourself and if you know the truth? What does it really matter how many people, institutions mirror back a distorted image? Because sometimes, like my life, this theme seems to be like, will you remember who you are no matter what we present to you? No matter what, will you remember the truth of who you are and where you come from? And so if I think about telling the truth and going back to like benefiting, a lot of it for me was like, I believe in telling the truth so that it can at least protect other people, if not myself. Like, I would love at some point if I could ever benefit from being a truth teller, but really my goal was always to, if I can't receive these things, then maybe if in my telling the truth, other people can be protected and maybe saved and not have to experience or go through the things that I've gone through. But Spirit is really going back to, again, this idea of like, we have this idea of pleasure. And yes, this world is a beautiful and magnificent world. And yes, this world is not meant to just be a punching bag, a trauma bag for people. Heaven and hell exist here simultaneously, and it's for the taking. Like, I do believe as humans, as creatures, it is our fundamental right to know the joys and the beauties of the world as well. But again, asking the question of like, where did I even get this idea? Like, where do we get our ideas, our philosophies? Like, who where does this get, again, who are the storytellers? Where do we get our beliefs from? Because if I remove the idea that things have to have a gain, that I do things to receive something in the more pleasure end of the spectrum. Because in my own life, and again, I'm not saying that this is your life, we all have our own paths. Mine is a very particular flavor. Like I said, it's a little bit too much at times, even for me, where I'm like, whoa, daddy, like this is, oh, I really packed it in on this life. But even asking the idea of like, what is pain? We all have preferences, but like, in the past 4 years, which really is kind of a testament to how terrible it is, because a lot of my life has been pretty terrible, if we are to be real. And I don't mean this in a victim-y, like, wait. I'm just being like, we're just talking facts. We're just talking facts. I have a lot of gratitude, like I said yesterday, because of my son. I would live this life all over again. I wouldn't change a thing, even though it's been horrific. But because the last 4 years have been particularly a fever pitch of excruciating pain and fear, there's been moments when I've been so terrified, and I've had to like do a lot of regulating to kind of calm myself due to the things going on. But there was this one particular day as I was preparing to go into a situation, and I just asked myself, I was like, what are we actually afraid of in this moment? Like, it seemed like there was obvious things of like, oh, but I was like, no. As I was meditating and doing my breathing techniques and all this stuff, but I was like, let's deduce it. What are we afraid of? And sometimes just asking the question just turns it off. Because all of a sudden it's like the mind, the ego was like, and then there's just kind of quiet. And same thing when I ask myself of like what is pain? Why is our preference always geared towards pleasure? Why is that the North Star? Because when you can make friends with the thing that you really do not prefer, it kind of opens up your appetite and allows for the mysterious thing. Like your vehicle can go to different places when you're not afraid. Because in another message I heard, well, I was thinking a lot about pain. And as I was kind of, again, making sense of it, sometimes wrestling with it, observing it, co-creating and chatting with Spirit about it, it just came to deduced. There's a lot of philosophical language around it, but essentially, pain is just ascension. It's the vehicle. It is the vehicle that will take you the quickest to ascending. We're not talking about like, it doesn't have to be spiritual ascension, even though it technically is, but like an ascension is just remembering. So what feels as though, and I say feel as though because if we go back to kind of the simple Buddhist idea of like Maya, illusion, people talk about this dream state. It's not real. Call it the Matrix. But we've been given senses, and we label things. We put a preference. So if I ask myself, like, why is it that I don't prefer pain? Now it seems like, well, you're like, because it hurts. But like, what is hurt? Like, you know, like follow the thread. Like, what is it? Because the deeper I go, it kind of just becomes quiet, and things kind of open up. Going back to curiosity, all of the really hard things that I've struggled with the last few years and continue to really struggle with, they're still ongoing. Not just making peace with it, not just accepting it and surrendering, but becoming curious, being playful, bringing in a little bit of joy and hilarity. I believe that one of the biggest transmuters is humor. If you can learn to laugh or to find the absurd, the absurdity in tragedy, and not in a debased way. And I know some of you will know those moments where like it's so beyond, the pain is so beyond, the circumstances are so beyond, there's kind of like that beautiful moment where that laugh crying, where you start to laugh because it's so tragic, it's so absurd. Life is so absurd. Being a human being is so absurd at times. And yeah, the line between that laughter and like, you know, but I think it's important, and to bring curiosity and to not need to know, like even just ask, like, why do we need to know? Like, I love knowing. Oh God, you know? So hold on, let me go over some more of these notes. Oh yeah, before I forget. Okay, so in some of my videos, I've talked about the download that I had with the infinity symbol, and what Spirit had shown me was that it was kind of like a big pestle and mortar. Picture like a stone slab that had kind of grooves, and then like the pestle, and it's going back and forth, and it's creating this friction between the stones, and you can hear it going. And it's this balance of, when we come in here, it's I know and I believe. And with those two things, the friction of I know and believe is what creates the spark. That's how we create. And Spirit, I don't know if you can really see. Anyway, it had me write out, I was playing with, where is it? The writing, oops, I'm dropping all my papers. Basically, I was playing with the writing of the word sun. Oh, hold on, I have to sort these papers. Good job, guys. And I was just kind of doodling, going into that in-between space. But then I started to deconstruct, because I saw it was like kind of like the same shapes. It's like these like either like half seas or half moons. So I kind of deconstructed it. And then as I was doodling some more, what I noticed is the way I had written the one S, the way it was curving, and the U and the N. But what I realized is I'm like, oh, it really is just like kind of the infinity symbol. If you kind of put them together, like the S and then the U and the N, if you kind of just, it's the infinity symbol. But the sun is always the circle, the dot in the middle. And then I was like, oh, you go from, we arrive here and we need to figure out the I know and I believe. That's one stage. You have to get there first. But then you elevate by taking out the I believe. And what brought me to that is that I had seen an interview with Carl Jung where the interviewer had asked him, and it was towards the end of his life, he's quite old, and the interviewer had asked him and said, do you believe in God? And he said, well, it's kind of complicated. Or no, he said, do you believe in God? And he said something to the effect of like, well, it's a little bit complicated. But he's like, essentially, he's like, I don't believe. I know. So I'd drawn out the infinity symbol, and I'd written, I know, I believe. And then I was looking at the sun. And if you were to take out the I believe, so the one half of the infinity, and then it just becomes the circle, the sun, the central source, the knowing. I know. You don't need to believe. There is nothing to believe. You've superseded that, because believing is about something being possible. Do you know what I mean? So it's a step below the fully I know. So going back to feeling compelled to be seen and recognized, they were showing me the wolf from this deck. Here, I'll pull it up because I love this deck. And it's a beautiful wolf. But essentially, the wolf, that lone wolf out in nature, who goes out and is howling, that longing that we have. Because some of the teachings that I follow from the Yogananda tradition, and that Asha, this woman I follow from that tradition, speaks of, is that there are only two states that keep us in this karmic wheel. It's longing and regret. So when I think of the wolf howling, there he is, longing to be seen, longing to be heard, longing to find its mirror to say, I'm like you. I see you, you're like me. We exist. We have found each other. It's a call and response. I'm going to call to you. Where did you go? Nowhere. I was always here, but it's always this, where did you go? Where are you? I'm longing. I'm looking. Where are you? It's in my heart. I'm longing. So Spirit was showing this and talking about the call and response, waiting for a response. But really, when you get to realize that you're the seer, the howl becomes a howl of proclamation, of knowing. I know. I am. Period. Do you know what I mean? The howl of proclamation. You're not waiting for a call and response. Yeah, going back to the singular, that's what the howl is about. Because we're always looking for something to complete us. But we're complete. Everything else is a bonus. Everything else is the mystery that you get to play with, you know? So these relationships. Okay, so going back to my existential crisis yesterday, where I was like, what is the point? Like, holy moly, 44 years of a certain type of flavor, and I feel like my understanding, and now to arrive at this point that seems anticlimactic. And in my walk yesterday, when I came home and sat with it, it just brought me back to like my other existential crisis of like, well, what do I believe in? Deduced. I believe in love because I know. We've superseded, I don't believe in love. I know. Some things I still struggle with, but one thing I will never question is just I know. Whatever love is, I know it to be true. And love is action, you know? So it gets demonstrated through things like grace, kindness, empathy, joy, expansion, laughter, tenderness, vulnerability. So yes, in my questioning, it brought me back to the Bodhisattva vow. Buddhists to continue to return again and again and again until everyone's liberated. And for me, liberation is like a liberation of suffering. Because for me, in my own path, my own journey, that is just for me, it may not look like your story, but my path, as stated yesterday, all I've known is immense pain, immense suffering, immense violence, and kind of a torture, and just like really terrible people in terrible circumstances. And what I had said yesterday is that what's remarkable and what I see as success is that I am softer now in this moment than I was as a baby being born. That even though I have experienced certain things, that by choosing love again and again and again, by holding up my belief system and being like, if this is what I believe, how can I get there? And so for me, the point is, even in self-actualization, where you're like, oh, there is no point. But even love is always a destination. And love is a mysterious thing. And one that I hope that we don't solve. And this is coming from someone who loves to know. But if I look at the thing that gives me a lot of joy, it's like, yeah, the unraveling, making sense of something, getting these little fragmented pieces to follow the thread, to be like, whoa, whoa, to allow myself to continuously be surprised. And both, again, if we were to use spectrum, but like in the best ways and also the worst ways. Human beings will never fail to surprise me. And in their spectrum, the darkness and the light, the things that we do to each other. But I've seen grace demonstrated. I've witnessed it again and again. And it's just, it's awe-striking. And I think that's why also I love art and music. There are just some things that our language cannot really put into words, like normal English vernacular. You need these different expressions for all the nuanced things that we go through. And also, art, music, these things are alchemical. You take experiences that are just beyond. They need a voice, but sometimes regular words or regular ways of expressing it, it can't be. So you have to be poetic about it. So for me, the point is, I believe in the Bodhisattva vow. That was in my tradition what has drawn me to Buddhism, what I feel like is again and again and again, is inherently without the benefit of receiving. I believe in kindness. I believe in compassion. I believe in everyone being liberated to whatever that looks like, to see an end to suffering, even though suffering does seem to be the great liberator. But like, I don't like seeing people suffer. As I said yesterday, like in my video, the thing that I've struggled with the most as a human is humans' propensity for cruelty. I don't want to understand it. I don't really want to make sense. I understand how people get there, but that appetite, getting off on seeing another creature suffer, I don't ever want my heart to go to that place. And trust me, I know my darkness. We all go to dark places, and we do love to see creatures suffer sometimes. Justified, not justified, but at the end of the day, with or without a supreme being, I would still believe in all of these things. And now that I know that I'm the seer and not the seeker, and that I can go unseen, I don't need to be seen. I'm seen because I exist. I'm the seer, so I'm already seen. So what does it matter if I exist in the world and no one really sees me? Doesn't matter. All right, well, I think I'll leave it there. Yeah. Whoa, that candle just went out. Yeah, the mysterious thing. Some things I hope we don't solve. And love is really a mysterious thing. And if I just focus on that, even if I don't arrive, it's a pretty great focal point. And I can lean into that. All right, world. Stay golden.